Hello, it's Sharon here from Butterfly Lullaby, and the date is the 26th of February 2022. I'd like to share with you jobs, health and uses of Japanese knotweed, the plant that most people hate here in the UK because they're not educated about this very, very useful plant. So here's my Japanese knotweed organic soap project. We've paid £180 to Oxford Bio to test this soap. And this is what I want to do with the soaps, because I know what it's like to financially struggle. I also know what it's like as somebody that's homeless. Not exactly the same because I've got family, but living in London, I lived in a flat with no electricity, no hot water, and it was very lonely and horrible. So even though I don't know what it's like to live on the streets, I know what it's like to live somewhere that's not very nice when you're working and you're getting paid a very, very bad, low salary of £25 a week when you're worth so much more. But anyway, that's another story. So what I want to do is actually, for the bee soaps that I'm creating, I want to trade those for food to feed poor families and stop pesticides on Japanese knotweed, protecting pollinators, lung health and the earth. I've liaised with our local church up the road, and Jason's very good, Elm Church. He gave our daughter a free room to teach art to children, and Councillor Kevin Griffiths funded our daughter to teach art to children. This is something, an independent council and church can do as a positive. When you've got councils that are not doing positive things, that's why we're not moving forward. And that's another subject we need to discuss. But anyway, going back to the soaps. So the bee soaps, I want to train people up to make these bee soaps so that poor families that are struggling on low income, caused by people that have got too much money, too much power, and simply don't care. So I want to help these poor families so they can actually have more money in their pocket by trading these soaps for food. Now, the butterfly soaps, right now, if you look on the media for children's programs, they're promoting bad language, sexual content, drugs, smoking, vaping, all sorts of things for children. It's wrong. And what I want to do is I want to sell these butterfly soaps and promote child and family friendly music, art and film. And I'd love people to get behind me and support me on this for our children's future. The leaf soaps. I know a herbalist out in the USA who grew Japanese knotweed for our herbs and for soaps, because we're doing the soap project together. And she's moved now. But anyway, I want to liaise with herbalists and help educate people about these amazing herbs, because all people know about in the UK is drugs. That's all they know, and that's why they're all in such bad health. People are using dangerous toxic pesticides on plants like dandelion, plantain, Japanese knotweed, etc., when really they need to be educated about the health benefits of these plants. Also need to be educated on how dangerous pesticides are. Here we have a Japanese knotweed soap, £28.36 for 1 bar of soap, 90 grams, made in Japan and imported to the UK. Ask yourself, why is that soap so expensive? It's because Japanese knotweed has got the highest resveratrol anti-aging properties of any plant, and that's why it's used in cosmetics here in the UK and overseas. And Oxford Bio sent me an email stating this, which is on my blog. Here we have a knotweed removal company in the UK, TCM, And this company has put my blog about Japanese knotweed on their website. Smoothie Recipe by Sharon Bainbridge, that's me. So I'd like you to check out their website, and I'd like to say thank you to TCM for being open-minded and for caring about our children's future and not just using pesticides to get rid of this plant, but actually advertising its benefits. I've spoken to 2 Japanese knotweed removal services, one on my gardening group, my organic gardening group, and the other was just a company that I contacted via Facebook, and they messaged me in Messenger, and they both confirmed that once the stems, the dried Japanese knotweed stems are dried, they cannot regenerate because they're dead, as long as there's no root attached. So we need to re-educate people in the UK about actually, you don't need to pay somebody to take that away when it's dead. You can reuse it in your garden. Overseas, they are creating Japanese knotweed paper, which is saving trees. They don't need to cut down trees to create paper. This is something we should be doing in the UK. And I want to see pesticides stopped on Japanese knotweed because it's a useful plant. And the money that's usually wasted on pesticides can be invested in a paper making factory here in Wales and in other places. And that's what I want to debate on and I want to see done ASP. Here is a Japanese knotweed envelope that I got this company to send to me. They sent me some samples of the paper, which is brilliant. And I hope to get artists all around the world painting and drawing on this paper and arranging an art exhibition showing people what you can do with Japanese knotweed and what a useful plant this is. I'll share with you some of the Japanese knotweed paper I created myself. It's more like cardboard actually, but imagine what you could do with this plant. You could create toilet paper, which would be far better than that bleached white stuff. People are making bamboo clothing. Why can't they do that with Japanese knotweed? There's so many avenues there, and even Japanese knotweed has won a honey award overseas. That proves that the bees love this plant and we should not be destroying it. Here is a letter my MP wrote to our Welsh Health Minister, and she stated how I cured my asthma with Japanese knotweed. Basically, a few years ago, when I found out what this plant was, we were badly missold in this property. We purchased this property back in 2002. I was heavily pregnant, and the estate agent did not pick up on Japanese knotweed in her garden. We saw a burnt patch in the garden. Looking back now, I can only assume that the Japanese knotweed that was in the garden was cut down, pesticides were used probably, and it was destroyed so they could resell the property. I think this because we were missold on this property with a blocked off stream that was not on the land register, and it was not mentioned by the ex-owners. To mention the other things that are wrong with this property, the only good thing about this property is the Japanese knotweed, because it's a herbal plant, it's a useful plant, and it cured my asthma. So I think it was back in 2015, that's when I started to change my diet, and I've got videos that prove this. I started to talk about, using herbs in my diet, etc. And that's when I started to use Japanese knotweed as a smoothie. So my asthma cleared up and I was no longer allergic to animals when I went around to family and friends. Like my mum, I wasn't itching my eyes and I wasn't wheezing when I saw their dog, when before I had terrible allergies. And with my friend Elaine as well, who's the godmother to my daughter, I wasn't allergic to her dog, whereas before I had to take my inhaler when I visited her. So, I know that I've got a dog right now that's, people say, non-allergic. But the fact is, I had a test done years ago when I was working in London, back in the 90s. And it's like a pinprick. So they sort of tested my hand and they proved that I was allergic to every single animal. It's not the fur you're allergic to, it's the saliva. So that's what people get confused with. It's the saliva that causes the allergies. When we first got our rabbit, Cindy Woo, I was still taking the inhalers and I was working in the school. So, yeah, I was very bad with asthma because of the asbestos on the roof. Got very run down. My asthma deteriorated, basically, from working in the school because it was so run down, and they had to put fans in the school to stop the wet floors, etc. I don't know how they passed the health checks, to be honest. Anyway, so we went through years of having rabbits, and I was using my inhalers when we first got Cindy Woo, first pet rabbit. And we had other rabbits. And then I got to a stage when I changed my diet, I was no longer allergic to the rabbits. So, people can sort of like try and go with what the papers and the media are saying, but it doesn't matter because I know my asthma better than anybody. And I had phlegm on my lungs for 48 years. I no longer have that phlegm on my lungs thanks to this plant. So I was using this plant back in 2015 in my smoothies. I didn't need to order any inhalers for 2.5 years. Then pesticides were used near our garden. The knotweed was coming into our garden from a neighbour's garden. And it's not their fault. This is a new neighbour. And I tried to get Swansea Council to get rid of their knotweed naturally, and they let me down. And I'm very upset and annoyed about this because I've had to go through years of not being able to use my herbal plant for organic soap making, for my smoothies, and just having an organic garden. That's just not fair. That's abuse. And I don't blame my neighbour for this. I blame Swansea Council. I'm sure that a lot of elites in power think they were really stupid because, to grow Japanese knotweed overseas on Prince Edward Island as a source of resveratrol herbal medicine, and then to go and pretend that this plant's a weed and invasive, etc., here in the UK is mind-boggling. It really is. It just shows how bad education has led us down in this country. February 2022, I've put in a Freedom of Information request to find out how much money, taxpayers' money, is wasted on pesticides and used to fund pensions. So I'm looking forward to finding out the costs, because I believe that we do not need to waste pesticides on Japanese knotweed when it's such a useful plant. It's used to treat Lyme disease. It's a natural antibiotic, a natural preservative. This plant is important and we need to use it instead of using pesticides. You can easily cut it down and control it. I've done that for years in our garden. It hasn't gone into our other neighbour's garden, and they've confirmed this, and I've lived here for 19 years now. I grew up in England and I was not educated about Wales and that they had their own language. Can you believe it? I didn't know that. I thought we were just all one big happy family. We all spoke English. That's what I was taught in school. So when I moved to Wales and my neighbour told me about the Welsh knot, my gosh, I was absolutely horrified. I couldn't believe it. The fact that Welsh children were forced to speak English and they weren't allowed to speak their own native language. And then they were punished and beaten by people that call themselves academics. It's just beyond belief, and that's why I have so much empathy and love for this country. We've also got the Rebecca riots. The Rebecca riots is about the history of the farmers and how they weren't allowed to feed their families. They had to pay to go over a toll gate, to go through a toll gate to, be able to feed their families. That's wrong. And they said no because they knew this was just another money-making scheme by these elites. So, on parade for me, which is a book my great-great-grandfather's in, the fact that this book will never make it into an English or Welsh or Scottish library is just sad, because they don't want to share the history, the true history of, what people go through. They only want to educate people what they feel they want to educate people with, what's important to them, not the real history. So anyway, I find it really quite abusive, the fact that these elites are spreading this propaganda about Japanese knotweed and how dangerous this plant is. I mean, I've had this plant in our garden for 19 years, and it's nowhere near our house. It hasn't ventured into our neighbour's garden. And, my grandfather was a Yorkshireman. This is my great-great-grandfather on this book, on Parade. But my other grandfather was a Yorkshireman. Now, his in-laws were very racist and couldn't stand him because he was from Yorkshire, and they were Londoners. How bizarre is that? Isn't it crazy the way the propaganda makes people hate one another? So, and both my grandparents were born here in the UK, and they both sets of grandparents served in the war, in World War II. And my great-great-grandfather, who was an Euro-Asian, served in World War One, and he wanted to protect his family and his country. And he was told no, because the white British elites were racist, basically. And that's what's in this book. Wasn't just him, but other Euro-Asians weren't allowed to fight in the war to protect their families and their home. But they stood up to these bullies, and they got to fight and protect their home. I mean, I'm very anti-war, and so is my daughter. She's actually written a song about anti-war. You can check her out on Melody Angelica's Broken Souls. But anyway, going back to this story, I've tried to get this book in the library in the UK, and I've been ignored. No surprise there. I mean, having had a small business and had that destroyed by British elites, I've really gone down the rabbit hole, and it's really opened up my eyes, actually, to what's going on in the UK, and I don't like it. I feel that working class people need to have a say over government, and I want to say over education, because it's let me down, it's let my family down, it's let my daughter down. I worked in a pub in London when I was in my 20s. A white skinhead, middle-aged National Front man said to me in so many words, "Go back to your own country." Now, I was born here. My grandparents served in the war, and I found that quite offensive, to be quite honest. He called me Bubble. He shouted at me, "Bubble, get me a drink and go back to your own country." Because I've got big brown eyes and I look maybe a little bit foreign, this is the only time I've ever had a racist slur against me. So I understand, even though my skin's white, I understand racism and how uneducated the UK is with regards to racism and how badly people are treated. It's just wrong. It really is. I would like to see people of all religions and all colour come together and just stop this craziness and be as one, because we cannot beat people with money and power and greed that want to destroy our children's future if we do not all work together as a team and actually see where the real problem is. They're pushing the racism with like the Japanese knotweed, getting people to hate Japanese knotweed because it's an Asian plant. It's come over to this country. We brought it over to this country. It's invaded the landscapes, etc., and people's gardens, blah, blah, blah. But they don't actually state what this plant is good for, do they? That's where people need to wake up. An ex-counsellor said to me, "Sharon, Swansea Council don't like you. They don't like you because you got actor Michael Sheen involved with helping saving this butterfly meadow and the school field. So I know Swansea Council don't like me. And boy, did they cause me hassle and problems when I home educated our daughter. But anyway, that's another story. So here's the newspaper that I've been deleted from history from. It was on the internet. Actor backs drive to save school meadow. I wrote to Michael Sheen and told him how fairy artist Josephine Wall wanted to help save our butterfly meadow, and there's some pictures of the butterflies that I saw on the field and photographed. And he said he'd like to help. So he helped save the school field. But of course, lots of parents, guardians, grandparents worked extremely hard with fighting, every day to get people to sign petitions. So this isn't about me writing to Michael Sheen. It's about me being deleted from history, basically, because that article no longer exists on the internet. It's been taken down because they don't want me. They don't want me to be known to anybody because of what I know. They want to hush me up and gag me, basically. Going back to the newspaper, the Welsh newspaper that printed the article about Michael Sheen saving the school field and meadow, I was quite taken back that they excluded English fairy artist Josephine Wall. I just couldn't make out why they did not put her in the article, and I found this very bizarre. We'd met Josephine a few years ago, and she drew with our daughter, lovely person, really kind person, who doesn't get enough credit here in the UK. She's well known over in America. But here you can see a sketch with our daughter Melody and some little sketches by Josephine, and this is her book, The Fantasy World of Josephine Wall. So she sent us a card, a butterfly card, saying, I'd love to help you save your butterfly meadow. Yeah, so it just shows you, doesn't it, how the media can just delete somebody and you just have to do your own research. When my butterfly lullaby business got destroyed by nasty British elites, I wrote to David Cameron, the Prime Minister at the time, and asked him for free IT support because apparently they were supposed to be giving out free IT support to small business. Of course, I got nothing. Governments all around the world could not care less about small business. They allow people to destroy them, and they should not be in government personally because they're letting people down. When I was in school, I was taught ITA English twaddle. And I call it twaddle because that's what it was. It was not the English language. It was an alien language that made no sense whatsoever and completely confused me and other children. I had to relearn how to read, write and spell all over again later on in life, and I left school with no qualifications because of this terrible education. But I'm proud of who I am because I've achieved so much on my own. I taught myself to type from a book. I worked my way up from reception to managing director secretary for a top architectural firm. And that's something that means more to me than some qualification these elite academics hand out. Now I'm going to show you some examples of ITA English twaddle. Can you read this down the bottom? The fifferman. I can't read the rest because I'm so short-sighted. Parents got this banned, ITA English twaddle, by complaining, and so did other parents. But overseas in the USA, they're still teaching this muck. Look at this title. That's going to say Mouse Explores the Cave. Does that look like Mouse Explores the Cave to you? Because it sure as heck does not look like that sentence to me. The fact that I and others were taught ITA English twaddle in school makes my blood boil, and it makes me very distrusting of elite academics and what their real agenda is. I want to introduce you to Councillor Kevin Griffiths, who supports home education. He supports our daughter. He funded our daughter to teach art to children in our local church, and the church gave her a free room to teach children art, to relax their minds because they're so stressed out in school. He's a council hero. This is what a council service is supposed to look like. He goes above and beyond to help our children, our families and our town. We used to have a cinema and an ice skating rink in our town years ago. This is before I moved here. Townspeople used to sell things from their homes and made a living. They didn't need to go to Swansea town to shop because they had everything they needed right on their doorstep in this town. Sadly, with all the technology we have today, the mobile phones, the computers, etc., and yet we have less going on in our little town than before. It doesn't make any sense, does it? We're not getting the funding we need in our town because a certain council has most of the funding and they're hogging it to themselves. Swansea Council need to change. A friend of mine wrote this book, Radical Home Education, and here's a quote from a former college lecturer, Julia Tucknott. Gifted musicians who cannot do maths fail. Do you understand that? They're failing in school because they cannot do maths. How ridiculous is that? Talented athletes who struggle with reading and writing fail. The real problem is children and teenagers are given too many subjects, and subjects that are not of interest to them, of no use to them. They need to do what they're good at, and they need support in what they're good at. Our daughter cannot read, write or spell it in school. The school system let her down because academics in the school system have no idea how to teach creative minds that they label disabled, dyslexic. They're far more than that. Thanks to home education, our daughter passed her music theory exam and she's going on to study music theory grade 6. I want you to look back at the quote from that lecturer who said that gifted musicians fail because they cannot do maths. And now look at our daughter who's passed her music theory exam thanks to home education. Our daughter passes grade 6 music theory. She's going to be able to compose music and write music sheets. This is something amazing and something to be proud of. I'm so glad I home educated. Did you know that some of the most famous people, famous musicians in the world cannot read sheet music because of their bad education? But they have a gift. They can play by ear. We're talking about musicians like Prince, Eric Clapton, there's so many. I've put them onto my blog, so I put a link in the description here where you can check them all out. And you can see for yourself that some of the most famous guitarists in the world, most talented guitarists, cannot read sheet music but play by ear. Playing by ear should be a qualification in itself, and I'd like to see this implemented in all schools. State education failed to teach our daughter to read, write and spell. I took matters in my own hands. If I, a British dyslexic mum, can turn our dyslexic daughter into a bookworm when she could hardly read, write or spell in school, then anyone can do it. Anyone can do it. I've got free support on my blog of how I turned our daughter into a bookworm. And I'd love to help people. So please check that out. And I just want to say that, it's important that you do your own research. Stop being told how to think. Be a free thinker and think for yourself, because that's how we can actually save our planet Mother Earth and just create more jobs. If we keep following the same old routine, we will never get out of this mess. I used art and music to help our daughter become the bookworm she is today. These subjects are important in schools and in education, so we need to fight for this verbally and make sure our children are getting the education they all deserve. When I was 16, I got paid £25 a week to go to art college to study graphic design. My friend got a job in graphic design thanks to the kind taxpayer, thanks to this free course. Now, students are getting in debt with education. What is it, £13,000 a year to go to art college and do 4 years or 3 years? That's a lot of money to spend on education. You're not guaranteed a job at the end of it. You know, this isn't fair. Look how it's changed. This is back in the 80s. I got paid £25 a week to go to art college. Things have changed so drastically. It's all working in the elite's favour. They're profiting from education, and that's not what education is supposed to be about. And also, a country that's promoted unisex toilets above victims, like child victims, women victims who have been hurt by certain people. And this is wrong. You know, yes, there's some fantastic men in this world, and I know some amazing men, but we do have bad men. And we also know how women are treated in wars, and how children are treated in wars. And it's abuse. It really is. And the fact that students are now taking up jobs, being brainwashed by universities, etc., to take a job that sells them as an object is wrong. It really is wrong, and they need re-educating. I would like people to watch a documentary called One Child Family, and it's about China and how families were forced to have just one child and bullied into having one child. It's a very interesting documentary, and it shows how propaganda can brainwash people into believing something is right and not questioning anything, but just going with what the people, the elites, say they should do, basically. Now China has no young people to look after the old. Women were forced into sterilisation. The babies were, left on the streets to die. It's barbaric. We must look at history, never forget history, and make sure people get to see all history, because that's important. So I'm going to leave you with some of my groups. I'd love to hear from you. Leave me comments below. I've got a dyslexic group, supporting people with reading. I've got an art family friendly group, and a gardening group, an organic gardening group. So do say hi and share any information you have with us. I'd love to hear from you.
Hi guys, so here's the Organic Gardening and Foraging Club. I'm going to be dropping the free, even though it is still free, because I don't think it's coming up in search engines. It's getting confused. So you'll be able to find it on Facebook. Here's the link here. So try that link, and if that doesn't work, then just drop the free before the organic. And I'd love to see you there. Chris from Nana's Naturals, one of my dear friends, I call her sister. She has her own herbal business, and she mentioned about sort of writing down seeds, that you've got that you want to swap, trade, whatever. So yeah, do send them in on the group, and love to hear from you and see what you've got and what you want to share, etc., what you want to find. So that's great. So take care and have a great week. smile.